I'm a trial lawyer here in Southern California. I've always been kind of a tech geek from day one. We had our first website up in 1996. I immediately saw the benefits of being on the internet and having a website. Fast forward to social media, jumped all in, started heavily getting involved with live streaming with Spreecast back around 2011, I believe. Had the pleasure of being on some amazing shows with Katie Couric, Anderson Cooper, Wall Street Journal, Peter Diamandis, some amazing people that really opened my eyes and made me realize that this technology connects all of us globally, unlike ever before. So I like now putting 30 years of my entrepreneurial legal experience into helping other people, hopefully avoiding the mistakes that I've made, shorten the learning curve, help entrepreneurs build their businesses both offline and online, primarily incorporating social media and live streaming to show their human side, which a lot of lawyers and other professionals don't like to do, but show their human side to help us all connect. And this is a good example of that happening, because had it not been for social and live streaming, you and I probably would have never crossed paths.
Right.
And so this is just a good example of how these platforms can be used to build new relationships and strengthen existing ones. So in a nutshell, that's me.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that introduction. And I think it's important that you highlighted how maybe a lot of professions haven't tapped into this mode of communication. And it really is so impactful. We can totally try to coordinate on social media and through text only. But when you've got a face-to-face and a voice-to-voice, that engagement is so much more impacting.
Always. It always has been. And I learned this. I learned a long time ago when I'm down at the courthouse, when we're trying to negotiate deals, if I'm picking a jury, whatever it might be, it's the human person-to-person experience that really makes the difference. Okay. And, you know, this is a great tool. This is a great tool to close deals. Even today, this will separate you from everyone else that's using email and texting and whatever. But there's nothing better than sitting across the table from somebody and working out the details of a big deal so that your client's happy, the other person's client's happy, and it's a win-win situation. So yeah, this is just a natural extension of what's always worked in business.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about what works in business, because I believe what we're honing in on today is that you have many tips for businesses that are engaging online. You know, they're not the traditional storefront probably. They are conducting commerce, providing products and or services online to their customers. And as someone who works in that general field, there are many pitfalls that I think you could probably help us avoid. And so today we're talking about, I believe, 9 tips that you have that are legal and entrepreneurial for online businesses. Is that right?
I have 9 suggestions I would recommend everybody doing business online on the digital platforms to pay attention to. They have a legal business entrepreneurial twist to them. Let me run through the 9 just real quick, and then we can go back and maybe highlight those that you might think would be of interest to your audience. Every time I do this, we never get through the full 9. And so I think it's important that we get through them, okay? And people can rewind. But, you know, what's important is I understand the power of social, you guys. I understand the power of live streaming. But as a trial lawyer, I will tell you 99% of the cases that I'm litigating, I'm helping somebody with, whether they're a victim or they're a defendant or they're a plaintiff who's had their trademarks or trade secrets stolen. Had these people used these 9 steps back on day one, we would have avoided probably 95+% of the litigation out there. So number one, if you're doing business online, regardless of whether you're selling products, services, consulting, do so as a corporation, do so as a limited liability company. And let me first say also, Rachel, that although I am a lawyer, I'm not your lawyer or the lawyer of anyone in the audience. And it's important people understand that I'm licensed in California. I'm not giving legal advice, but what I am trying to do is just give you some broad brushstroke ideas and things to think about. Consult a lawyer in your state if you have any follow-up questions. Now, what I just did is what I recommend everybody to do, okay? Regardless of what you're doing, let people know who you are. And I'm appearing today on behalf of my firm, Jackson & Wilson, or streaming.lawyer. That's important. So do business as a corporation or limited liability company. Number 2, be aware of intellectual property rights. If you have intellectual property, a trademark, a trade name, take the necessary steps to protect your intellectual property rights, and at the same time, respect other people's intellectual property rights. Number 3, promote your products and services through your business. If I jump online and I'm trying to sell a downloadable product, let your audience know you're a company who has a product to sell. I don't want them to have the impression that I, as an individual, am trying to sell this product, because that opens up liability exposure towards me. If you're a company, let your audience know. If you're Sammy the Surfer and you've got a new GoPro mount for the front of your surfboard, jump on live stream and say, hey, this is Sammy the Surfer from Sammy the Surfer in Orange County, California. I've got a new product. Let them know who's producing the live streaming. It's very, very important. Number 4, use contracts and other written agreements. What I've noticed, Rachel, is a lot of people think they have a contractual agreement with somebody else that they're doing business with online, and they find out after the fact that that's not the case. They go out and spend money to retool. They go out and buy products and services. They market something, and then they realize they really don't have an agreement with the other side that's binding under the law. I've had friends who are speakers fly across the country to do an event, only to find out that when they got there, they weren't going to be speaking. There was no contract or agreement to do that. So always get your big, important understandings whittled down to a binding written agreement, whether it's an email, a text, or a formal written contract. Next, embrace technology. If you're an entrepreneur and you're doing business online, use technology to do business better, to create an exemplary client experience. If you're not creating an exemplary, exceptional client experience, those clients, potential clients, are going to go someplace else. And I think people really need to realize that while the digital technology allows us to automate a lot of things, there's still nothing more important than that human-to-human relationship, that human-to-human contact. So embrace technology, but don't forget about the human side of doing business. That's not the lawyer, that's the entrepreneur in me. Last, I always tell people, it's not last, but to help share and make the lives of other people easier and solve their problems. If you're doing that online, you're putting yourself ahead of everyone else. A lot of lawyers out there, a lot of professionals, they don't want to share their secret sauce. They're afraid that somebody won't hire me if I tell you how to solve your own legal problem. The reality is most people don't try to do these things themselves. Okay, by sharing your secret sauce, you're building relationships, you're sharing value, you're building trust. People will start to like you. And then when they need you, they'll call you or they'll refer their family or friends to you. Next, have mediation and arbitration clauses in all of your agreements. Have an attorney's fees clause in all of your agreements. The reason that's important is that if somebody does something to you, Rachel, you may not be able to hire me or afford my hourly rate to represent you, but if there's an attorney's fees clause in that contract and you and I feel that you have a strong case and we can go after the other side, I'll know at the end of the case that I'll get paid my attorney's fees from the other side. So it'll give you access to quality legal representation. And then also have a venue clause. That's the biggest thing, and that's the last step that we're going to talk about. Have a venue clause in all of your agreements. And what that means is that if I'm here in California and I'm selling products in New York, if somebody has a claim against my company, that venue clause is going to say you have to pursue your claim in Orange County, California. Okay, and it avoids me having to fly across the country to defend myself or my company on a frivolous lawsuit, or maybe even a small lawsuit that may have merit, but it's just inconvenient for me to travel to the East Coast. So those are 9 things I think all online businesses need to pay attention to when they start embracing technology and the digital platforms to do business. I know that's a lot, but I just wanted to cover it.
No, that's great. And I want to remind everyone, I've actually drafted some questions as we're going, which I'm going to jump into. If I don't get your question, I want you to submit your own. You can do that if you're watching on Facebook or here in Huzza in the Q&A tab, and I'll make sure we bring it up. But I am going to go ahead and begin with some questions because these are really good.
Sure.
Let's jump back to the corporation or LLC. So I know I'm currently doing business as a sole proprietor, but I know I need to move into structuring my business. As someone is beginning to start, or even as they're building their online business, again, with the disclaimer that you're not my lawyer, you're not anyone who's right. Our lawyers, but what do you think is a good time to start forming that? I mean, is it normal for people to start as a sole proprietor and move into an one of those, or do they just kick off as an LLC?
Yeah, most lawyers will tell you do that first thing before you start promoting your services, before you start selling products. I'm an entrepreneur. I understand the need to get things going, to take action, to engage in activity. I've got so many people that don't take those first necessary steps to build their business because they haven't formed a corporation or an LLC. All right. So it's, paralysis by analysis. And what I'd rather see is for you to do what you need to do to get the ball running. As soon as possible, form a corporation or an LLC that's right for your business and that's right for your state, depending on the laws. And you need to consult with an attorney in your state. The reason that's so important is it provides a protective shield between you and your client's customers or the consumer. That's really, really important. It protects your personal assets from your business liabilities, but it also gives you down the line the ability to create retirement plans that benefit you. It gives you the ability to acquire proper funding for your company that might not be, that's not going to be available to a sole proprietor. It just depends on what your long-term goals are. And when you sit down with the right lawyer and the right CPA, they can help you put together, a business plan that works for you. So the answer to your question is I would do it as soon as you can. Now, here's a little secret for your listeners. It's really easy to set up a corporation or a limited liability company. That's the easy part. You can go to LegalZoom.com to start that process. Where I see most of the people make mistakes is they fail to follow up with all of the other annual requirements that take place with those entities. There are filing fees. There are documents you need to prepare, file, and sign each and every year. And if you don't follow the rules of that particular business entity, then it's just as if you didn't have one at all.
Right.
So set it up correctly and then manage it correctly during the years that follow.
And then I know you mentioned in the blog post you wrote about this, which I'll share momentarily, but I think you'd said there are resources out there. So it's not like we're going in this blind. We're like, well, I should just know that I need a reminder on my calendar for every January 15th that I'm going to redo this.
Right.
But can you talk about some of those resources that are out there for us?
Well, let me just say, if any of your listeners would like to see my list of what I send my clients after we set up their entities, just reach out to me at streaming.lawyer. I'd be happy to send you that list. Okay. But let's just say there are 10 or 15 things that need to be done each year. And they're different depending on if it's what state you're in, whether you're complying with state law or federal law or both. So, there's not one list for everything. A couple of things that people really drop the ball on are they fail to get business insurance in addition to their homeowner's insurance. If they're doing business out of their home, then the question is, will your homeowner's insurance cover business liabilities? Will it cover mistakes made by officers of your company? And the general response is it's not going to cover errors and omission by your company directors and officers. So you have to have the right kind of insurance. You don't want to commingle your personal funds with your business assets. You want a separate credit card for your business, a separate credit card for your family, separate business account, checking and savings for your business, a separate account for personal matters. Most people combine those together. And when they do that, what they don't realize until something bad happens is that they don't have any protection at all.
Exactly. And that's so interesting that you mentioned that too. I hadn't even considered the whole business insurance thing until I'd already started my business. I'm like, oh, I need to get that going because, it's the CYA mentality, just like better to have it than not because you can't predict what's going to happen.
Yeah. And so the idea here is to plant some seeds in the minds of your audience. And really, this is very common stuff that a lot of people just don't think through. We're doing business online now, and you have to treat it like a business. And so these are things that people can start putting together starting this afternoon, starting this evening, okay, to make sure that their business is set up correctly so that if something good happens, they can maximize the benefits. For example, a properly set up business might give you some tax advantages on your income, on your profits. If you plan ahead now, then you can probably save massive tax liability down the road, but you got to plan now. Same thing if you find yourself, God forbid, at the wrong end of a lawsuit. If you set things up correctly now, you'll be able to protect your personal assets. And with insurance, you may be able to get a good defense law firm involved to protect you on the dime of the insurance company to defend you in civil litigation. So there's just a lot of things people need to pay attention to from a legal business standpoint.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to the next one. And again, it looks like we have some questions that are forming too. Ross, before I do move on, he's asking, for LLCs, is it better to set it up in the state you live in or look for the state with the most favorable tax rates?
Well, look, it depends on what you're able to do. The better the tax rate, obviously, the greater your ability to maximize your end of year profits because you're not paying taxes. That's why you see a lot of professional athletes set up their residence in Florida. But there's a myth in Florida, they don't have state income tax. And so a lot of these athletes are avoiding state income tax legally because they live in the state of Florida. And the reality, though, is you have to set up your entity in a state that you're either doing business in or a state where you have some type of minimum contacts. If you're doing business in New York, Ross, and your products are manufactured in New York, Ross, and you're selling out in New York, and you have no minimum contacts with the state of Nevada, if you set up an LLC or a corporation in Nevada, like a lot of online companies are recommend that you do, it's probably not going to be set up properly and in a valid sense because you don't have the necessary minimum contacts with that state. And it gets pretty complicated. So you have to comply with your local, state, and federal laws to be able to avail yourself of the various advantages available to that entity and the tax benefits. It's confusing, but the bottom line is where you're doing business is probably where you need to set up your business entity.
That makes wonderful sense. Thank you for that question, Ross, and thank you for that answer, Mitch.
Yeah.
Well, again, moving on to the next topic was intellectual property. I have a question about this. So can you give us some examples of what for a business might fall into the bucket of intellectual property? I mean, I've seen people use like a tagline as like that's their tagline and that trademarked or whatnot. But can you give us some more examples about what we might need to consider as intellectual property to protect?
Well, I think to protect if you create something, okay, if you create a video, a diagram, an infographic, a product or service that has a unique look to it or performs a unique service, then you have intellectual property rights concerning your creation. Some of those rights, a majority of those rights are formed automatically. You don't, if I do a blog post, I don't have to copyright that blog post with using IP law. It's automatically protected. So just think about this. If you're a creator of something, the next question is, are you protecting it? And if so, are you protecting it the right way? If you are using other people's content, if I'm grabbing other people's images, other people's videos, if I'm taking somebody's product and promoting it as my own, okay, then you're going to have intellectual property right exposure. You're breaking the law, and you may be looking at damages. The most often asked questions, as early as this morning, that come my way have to do with someone like you and I reporting on breaking news. Let's say Apple is having a big conference, right? About their new iPhone or a new product. What can I display while I'm there concerning the Apple announcement? Can I live stream that? Can I take pictures of what they're doing and put it on Instagram? Because Apple has the intellectual property rights to what they're doing. And so you have privacy issues. Is it a public announcement? Is it a private venue? There's what's called the fair use doctrine. The fair use doctrine says that if I'm using somebody else's intellectually protected content that somebody else created, for example, commentary, I'm using it for a news broadcast, I'm using it in the classroom, then under the fair use doctrine, it may be permissible for me to do that. The reality is, though, and when I was at Periscope Summit New York, first Periscope Summit, we had a panel. And on that legal panel, Ruth Carter and I talked about these things. And honestly, this was the big issue most people had. It's like, when can I use the fair use doctrine to talk about somebody else's products or services and show them and use them? Music in the background, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it might be. This hashtag thing behind me, it's mine. But if that belonged to somebody else, do I have the right to be online with that over my shoulder? And so what people need to understand is, even though you may feel you have the right under the fair use doctrine to use something, it's such a gray area of the law. It could be a very expensive adventure to litigate that issue, even if you win. So we always tell people, go out and get permission from the creator of the content before you start to use somebody else's stuff.
That makes sense. Terry Johnson actually has a question in the sidebar. You were talking about the Apple products. So let's say that they purchase their new iPhone 7 or whatever. Are they allowed to then take pictures of that and share that out? I mean, is that different than if you were at like an event and trying to share it out?
So if somebody buys a new iPhone and as they're walking out of the store, they can take a picture of it and then shares it on Instagram.
Like does their own, oh, here, I'm going to do a how-to video now on how to use my new iPhone that I just bought on opening day that it's
Right. So listen, it's one of those things where unless you've got permission from the creator of the product or service, I would encourage people not to do that. Now, the reality is a lot of big brands, a lot of big companies actually encourage consumers to do that. They're starting to understand that they're getting free branding, free marketing, free publicity by other people holding up their products and services, right? But what if you get the wrong person holding up your product or service? If you're, a big thing that's come up is with the election coming up, we have politicians that are playing music in the background and they take the stage without the permission of the artist, without the permission of the marketing company who owns the rights to that particular song. And it's not okay. It's actually actionable. So you got to be careful with the music you're using, the products you're using. If you don't have permission from the creator of that content, the safe play would be not to use it at all. And I hate saying that, you guys. I'm just sharing, being a good lawyer is not telling people what they want to hear. It's telling people what you honestly believe. And there's a difference.
Well, if it keeps us all out of jail and paying fines, we're thumbs up on that one.
Exactly.
A personal story of that. I remember I did a video of my 5-year-old's birthday party and just a little montage video in the park. And I put it with a music bed of the Cantina music from Star Wars. I had it on YouTube. About 2 or 3 months later, I noticed that they had taken it down because I was using something licensed by George Lucas. I was like, oh, yes, he would know that I did that.
It's crazy. I was an early user of Google Glass. And so I was at a big Rotary conference where we had 150 high school kids joining us for breakfast. And then they would pick the occupation or profession they were interested in, and they shadow us for the rest of the day. So we'd always take about 20 to 25 kids to court with us and let them watch a trial and meet the judges. So I walk into our conference with Google Glass. I'm shooting live video of what's happening. I didn't think about the music in the background. When I uploaded the live video to YouTube, it was great. Everybody enjoyed it. But then I had the same experience you had about 4 or 5 months later. I got a notice that music playing in the background indicated and red flagged a copyright infringement. And, it was totally in good faith. It was for community service. It was for a charitable event. But we all have to be careful with, what's going on around us and what we're actually sharing. So.
Absolutely. And I know I'm going to get a couple questions on this on Facebook Live, but I'm going to go ahead and move on and we can come back to it. Let's talk more about the contracts, written contracts and agreements. I did have one person ask, is a contract the same as an agreement, or is there a difference, a vital difference between the two?
Well, to have a valid contract, you need an offer and acceptance and consideration. It has to be clear and concise, unambiguous, and in writing. It depends on what the products or services are. It depends on what state you are. The laws are different in each state, and that's what makes it so challenging. But as long as you have a clear understanding between the parties, exactly what the terms are, the conditions, the price point, the quantity, who, what, when, where, how, and why, that's a good start. Putting it in writing and having everybody sign it is also a great way to make sure that you have a binding contract. And I would encourage everyone if you're selling the same widget day after day, year after year, sit down with a lawyer and make sure the contract you're using to sell that widget or to book your speaking engagements, or to design your apps with third-party app designers from around the world, make sure these documents are valid in the country that you need them to work for you in. The other thing is, though, using technology is you can then upload these contracts to some of the online platforms that allow the customer or the client to sign them digitally. And we're doing that with authorizations to retainers agreement, and it really works well, and it just really simplifies the whole process for everyone else. But yeah, you got to make sure that your contracts are in writing. Now, in some states, oral contracts are valid, but there are limitations. And I will tell you right now, I'd rather represent somebody that has a clear and concise written agreement or contract with somebody than it coming down to he said, she said as to what the truth is. You're rolling the dice.
Yeah, I would imagine. Well, and then so you had mentioned having a lawyer sit down with you and go through, like, perhaps you are a speaker and you do public speaking engagements, you get a contract for that. But let's say you also do sell that widget. Do you recommend sitting with a lawyer and having them draft up those templates for each of those purposes, have it ready to kind of plug and play based on who the client is?
You know what's really cool is there are so many available forms online now. For example, once again, I'm not affiliated with LegalZoom.com, but you can actually set up a monthly plan with them where you have access to these types of documents. And so I would encourage anyone, depending on what type of numbers are involved, okay? If you're dealing with high 6- and 7-figure numbers, you want to make sure you're crossing your T's and you're dotting your I's. You want to make sure that contract you're using in California is valid in New York. You want to make sure that contract you're using in New York is valid in London, in Sydney, in Berlin, wherever it might be. So it just depends on, I think it depends on what the upside and downside is, depending on how much time you want to spend doing all of this. I will tell you, for most of the people in my social media communities who I'm involved with, most of the documents they need are readily available online through different resources.
Sure.
You know, for free.
Well, and I know, yeah, I've and you can do a free trial with LegalZoom.com. Let's say you hop in free trial, and it really is easy because I know it walked you through like these really easy questions like, are you doing? Where is this contract taking place? Where are you located? Where's the person located? You know, dollar amounts, dates, things like that. And it really helped walk you through and formulate that whole document. So I co-sign that LegalZoom's nice. I know I think I did the free trial, did everything I could, and then unsubscribed. Because I'm a hack. But
you're an entrepreneur. And the bottom line
that's
matters.
Right. I'm trying to save that bottom line.
Did you catch I did a Periscope this morning on why you should not be an entrepreneur. And yes, and it was a prelude to today's show. And so I basically went through, forget about the legal stuff. I went through about how hard it is, how physically draining it is, how emotionally draining, how it hurts relationships, how it's financially devastating. And when it's all said and done, my point was, if after all of that, you still want to do what you want to do, well, then you're already an entrepreneur. Right?
If you haven't run for the hills yet, you're still tuning in, maybe you should go ahead and try it.
And you're a redneck, you know? And I mean, that's what I felt like.
I felt
like I was giving that. And, you know, so it's one of those things where just go about things the right way, continue to improve what you're doing on a daily basis. And that's the entrepreneurs, the people I've helped hundreds of clients start their companies, litigate issues in their companies. Some have gone on to build big companies. Some have sold out, whatever it might be. The bottom line is the clients I've represented that were successful with everything we're talking about, they actually did the things that we're talking about. Sometimes, you know, never all at once, but, you know, they start and they set up their corporation, and then they start looking at what type of insurance they needed. And then they start looking about contracts to use, and it was building blocks. And as long as you keep moving forward and you're building upon each of these 9 steps, one after another, at the end of a month or two, you'll be done. You'll have this stuff set up, and then you'll be ready to rock and roll.
Nice. I want to move on to the next one. This one I think has some interesting caveats to it that I would love to delve into. You talk about promoting your product and service for your business as opposed to a single person like myself.
Right.
There's Rachel Moore, and then there's Really Social's my business. You're saying I should promote stuff through Really Social so that whatever that insurance umbrella stuff is covering that versus
Absolutely.
just me, myself, and I.
Huge.
And the reason I'm kind of interested in this is because I feel like, and some of you guys in the sidebar may agree, on anyone else viewing, that a lot of the company versus person lines are being blurred. Many of us are conducting a business on our personal profiles on Facebook or Twitter or anything when there's a separate company or entity page or Twitter profile or whatever.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about that and how to navigate that based on your advice, but then we're also trying to get more reach, I guess?
Well, so Rachel, let's say, so your company, your domain really.social, is that what it's really.social, correct?
Really.social.
Really.social. So let's say you were doing a show about Instagram's new storyline capabilities. You'd want to jump on, and the ideal way of handling this is, first of all, I want you to be an LLC or a corporation. Okay. And so having said that, this is Rachel Moore from really.social. Let's talk today about the new Instagram stories, and then go into your presentation. It only takes a couple of words to place the consumer on notice that this is a show brought to you by really.social. On your Facebook, personal Facebook page, the same thing applies. Here's a new live stream from really.social on behalf of Rachel Moore. I think it's really important because you're right. The benefits of all of this blending together, and I get it, also increase your liability exposure. So you need to be aware of that. Just because things are blended together, that's great for relationships. That's bad when it comes to protecting your personal assets from your business liabilities. If you're a sole proprietor, then even when you do that, it's not going to protect you. For those of you doing business as general partners in general partnerships, tomorrow morning when you get up, stop doing that. General partnerships and general partners, that's the worst way in the world to do business. You're putting yourself out there for any liabilities incurred by your co-partner are going to be your liabilities, and you don't want to do that. So there are so many simple and easy ways, like what we've already talked about, to avoid getting yourself in that mess. I hate to see people work years to build something only to lose it, with the snap of a fingers because they didn't set things up right in the first place.
That is a perfect example, and I appreciate. I actually just have that I've got homework after today because I need to go get my my actual business structure set up. So I'm CYA.
Yeah, good.
But it's all good stuff to know, and I appreciate that too because some people are making their whole brand based on themselves, but then they're probably insuring themselves to make sure that they're not giving things out that are going to probably lash back on them. Correct?
Right. But for example, when you see a lot of celebrities, whether it's the Kardashians, I'm just trying to think who you'd see on TV all the time, even some of the new reality TV stars, what a lot of people don't realize is their corporations, their limited liability companies. When they're entering into contracts to do a TV show or to sell perfume, it's their company entering into the contract, and they're the spokesperson for their company. I mean, when you dig down deep into the legalities behind the scenes and pull the curtain back, that's what's really happening. So I'm okay with Rachel Moore being Rachel Moore. It's just that everything you do should be on behalf of your company. Okay. And that's the important distinction that needs to be made, but most people miss.
Gotcha. Great. Well, cool. Let me, oh gosh, I want to kind of move around because we've got some other things that we want to talk about too. Let me circle back actually to a couple questions people asked and things we already touched on really quick. Barb here in Huza asks, do you see video contracts overtaking written contracts at any time with all this video stuff?
I'm already seeing it. As a matter of fact, what we tell people, Barb, that's a very good question. I see video changing everything. Okay, I see video changing everything. But when you're out in public and you're doing a Periscope, you're covering an event, or a Facebook Live, a Huza, whatever it might be, if possible, get the people who are involved in your production to give you video acknowledgement that they've given you permission to videotape them live. Even if you're in a public place, depending on what kind of show you're doing, use that video, whether it's before or after to record their permission. And in almost all instances, once again, depending on the state, depending on the issues, you're going to have valid permission to then turn around and publicize this content. I had somebody who's well known on Twitter reach out to me, and he had shared live video footage about a protest that was taking place. And I'm going to just leave it general like that. And Twitter wanted to use that live video in their marketing and production. It has to do with Periscope and maybe Twitter Live or whatever we end up seeing down the road. And what this gentleman did, and I thought it was really smart, is he obtained permission ahead of time from everybody in that video, not knowing that he was going to be approached by Twitter a couple of months later. So since he had everyone's permission, he then had the rights to turn around and sell this video clip to Twitter, and Twitter would be able to use this because permission had been acquired all through the chain of custody.
Gotcha.
So if by thinking long term, you're actually increasing your chances of, you know, long-term profits too.
And Terry's asking a tangent question that, do you just say to the person on video, do I have your permission to record your statements on video? I mean, I'm sure there's some legal.
It depends on the situation. It depends on what you're filming. But for example, what I would encourage someone to do is if you've got a video show where you're going out and you're doing the same thing each week, I would put together a 4 or 5 sentence paragraph that you will actually read to somebody on camera. It's not going to be in the part that you post live, but it's just something you're going to save back at the office or on your hard drive, where you're going to read these 4 or 5 sentences and you're going to get that person to acknowledge his or her permission. Okay. Or you have them read it. So it just depends on the situation, Terry. That's a good question.
But then check with your state, because I can see that being like, yes, I don't have to do a little waiver and have them sign it. But if my state says I do, yes, I do.
Well, look at the whole Kim Kardashian, West, Taylor Swift issue with somebody recording somebody else's voice, supposedly without their permission, as to what was or wasn't going to be in a song. Depending on what state you're in, that affects whether or not it was criminally permissible for somebody to record that phone conversation in the first place. If everyone had given permission, whether it's on video or on the recording itself, to use that recording for whatever reasons, then the problems that I'm reading about now wouldn't have happened. So it depends on the state you're in.
And then I think I may go ahead and answer this too. Terry's asking, how about having a written release at the ready? I think that's always a good idea, because some people just like paper.
Absolutely. You know? My briefcase has always got a release ready to go. You never know when no, but I mean, when I'm down at the courthouse, sometimes even at the beginning of a case, I'll have a chance to get it settled. And I want to avoid buyer's remorse. And so we have generic settlement agreements that we'll use. And if somebody wants to get the case done, I'm talking about dealing with other lawyers. You know what? We put it in writing, and then it's binding, regardless of whether or not somebody changes their opinion, you know, or thoughts when they get up the next morning.
Right. No, I think that makes good sense. It's like, let's just hit while the iron's hot, and I have it ready.
I like Ross's comments right there. If you have a chance to capture video on a breaking news event, capture first and then get permission if you can. And keep in mind, if it's an actual breaking news event, the general rule is under the fair use rule, you're able to repurpose and use that content because it's breaking news. If it's a news story or if it's a commentary that you're doing, you're going to probably fall under that fair use doctrine exception. So. Great insights. Thank you for those. And before we get too much farther, I do want to ask a question. Sandra, she had asked on Facebook, trademarked something in 2013 and just found someone else using it with almost exactly the same words. Does she need to contact a lawyer and show them what's going on? She needs to evaluate the pros and cons of whether or not it's worth her time and trouble to protect what she believes is her intellectual property. So it's a cost benefit analysis. I also have had that happen to me, and in 2 instances, even as a lawyer, I'm like, I'm just not worried about it. It's just not worth my time, trouble, or attention. So yes, if you think somebody is stepping on your intellectual property rights, contact a lawyer in your state who you can trust, who's got experience, to at least counsel you as to what your options are.
I gotcha. All right, so you guys, I've shared the link to Mitch's blog in the sidebar Definitely read all those 9 tips. One thing I want to talk a little more about was the venue clause. And again, I know LegalZoom and other tools like that will help you establish if you need the venue clause. But are you finding that as we cross digital, geographical divides because of digital capabilities, this is becoming more important?
Yes, it's a big issue that most people don't even think about. They don't realize that by doing a show or by putting out a product or service, they're arguably exposing themselves to jurisdictional claims on the other side of the country or even on the other side of the world. And so be very aware of, if you're producing a show here in California and you've got clients and customers in Florida and New York who are watching it, who are buying your products or services, whatever it might be, there's a good chance that if something bad happens, you can be forced to defend yourself in New York or in Florida, should a lawsuit be filed or should a claim be filed. So having the right venue clause that's a part of your sales transaction, it's a part of the agreement between you and your customer or client, can do a couple of things. It can make sure that if litigation's necessary, it's handled in your backyard and not theirs. Number two, it's a deterrent. So if I'm here in California and somebody in Florida feels that I've done something wrong, they're going to have to evaluate traveling all the way across the country in litigation, back and forth and back and forth. And is that something they really want to do? So it's a good deterrent, really forcing people to take a step back, take a deep breath, and see whether there are other ways to resolve our issues. And some of those other ways that we talked about are mediation and arbitration. If you have these clauses in your agreements, you can reach out to a disgruntled client or customer and say, listen, rather than us getting ourselves into litigation, let's mediate this. Let's have a professional retired judge look at the facts, listen to our arguments, and make a decision. And now today, there are more and more services where you can mediate these things online. Just like we're doing right now, you can have a video conference center in California, one in Florida. You can mediate or arbitrate your disputes to a full and final conclusion. It saves everybody a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of hassle.
Well, and that segues nicely into yet another one of these tips, is to include a mediation and arbitration clause in your agreement. So are those like the steps you could take before hauling everybody into a courtroom or something, that you can actually just, let's pursue some mediation first and see if we can't come to an agreement on this?
Absolutely, it is. And oftentimes the courts now require the parties to mediate or arbitrate. Once we file and we're in litigation, the judges will make us go out and try to resolve our case through mediation or arbitration. If we're unsuccessful, we can then come back into court. It is something that can be done ahead of time too. Once again, having this in your contractual clauses will give you the ability for me to reach out to you, Rachel, and say, hey, listen, Rachel, I'm sorry you're having a bad experience. Paragraph 7 of our agreement talks about mediation and arbitration. Why don't you pick a mediator? I'll pick a mediator. Let's let them select a neutral third-party mediator, and that third party will be the one that resolves our issues. It gives you the ability to have that conversation, and really it gives you and I both a direction to take to resolve the issues in an amicable way, so that hopefully when it's all said and done, we can continue to do business in a win-win situation.
That's excellent advice. I'm totally going to go to LegalZoom after this or find a good lawyer. And then I wanted to touch on this one briefly, because I find, some of my friends watch your, I was thinking this too, but for people watching this on Huzza, and probably if they're watching on Facebook Live, maybe they don't need this as much, but I am going to post an edited version of this video on Facebook later. So they're probably going to see it. But people who are not embracing technology as an online, people who are not embracing online technology.
Okay.
So I'm usually thinking in context of they're not using Google Drive or they're not using cloud sharing tools. But this covers everything: social media, email marketing, all the things. Do you have any favorites that you really like to encourage business owners to please start using this for your own benefit?
So you're breaking up a little bit.
Sorry,
and are you saying with respect to that technology, is any of that technology that I recommend people start to use?
Well, what are your favorites? If you had to encourage business owners to use one or two tools, which would those be?
Well, I think the most important tool would be some type of contact management tool, because I think business today is all about relationships. So, and it has to be a tool that you and your staff, your office, your team will use. It could be the greatest tool in the world, but if it's too complicated for somebody in your office to use, a key player, they're not going to use it and it's not going to work for you. I really like Nimble, John Ferrara's platform. I think Nimble does a great job, in his words, to auto-magically connect your contacts with what's happening in the social media world. And it's really cool, guys and gals. You should check it out. It pulls in what Rachel and I are doing. So before the show today, I actually pulled Rachel up, and it pulls in all of her social media feeds into one easy to read window, along with many other things that it does. But, you know, use a good contact management tool like Nimble to keep track of your relationships. I think that's key. We use Google Drive. I think Google Drive's, you know, a powerful tool that allows me to be more efficient wherever I am, wherever I'm going, early in the morning, late at night. It allows me to access many of the documents that we've talked about and provide a better client experience, because I can do things for them regardless of where I am. I don't need to be in the office. And for me, that flexibility is gold. I just love being able to service the clients if I decide to do so. So those are two key tools. I think also it's really, really important for businesses today to start embracing this little bad boy right here. Everything that we do, I'm speaking, I was going to say next month, but it's actually this month. We're in September. I'm keynoting in a couple of weeks up in Utah at a big lawyer convention, a couple hundred lawyers. We're going to talk about marketing to millennials. We're going to talk about, you know, some other things with building their practices, you know, a couple of tips. And I told you, I want to talk about a couple of things we've never really talked about today. And just real quick, everything that we do today, you guys, as business owners, you know, what technology do we use? You have to think about this. If you're creating a product, a service, if you're marketing yourself, if you're building relationships, and it doesn't include this, then you're wasting your time. You're going about it the wrong way. I mean, with almost 3 billion people around the planet, you know, having access to this and high-speed internet, with Google and Facebook rolling out and blanketing the planet with internet, with people having, you know, more access to these than they do working toilets and drinkable water. This is the future. And so everything you're doing online needs to complement someone's ability to access your products and services, to communicate with you using a smartphone. I think that's key. So even the Nimble answer is premised upon this first, okay? Because this is the direction we're moving. And having said that, ask your clients, when you meet a client for the first time, when they're sitting across your desk or you're engaging with them online, you know, listen more than you speak, and ask your clients, how would you like me to communicate with you? And this is a game changer, because we picked up 7-figure clients, Rachel. I asked them that simple question. Okay, I've had clients where they fired their first lawyer because they weren't able to communicate with their lawyer. Okay, the lawyer is emailing the client, and it's a young client, and the client doesn't use email, so she's never hearing from the lawyer. Okay, he tries to call her, and she doesn't even use her telephone. Her voicemail's full, and she wants the client to communicate with her, the lawyer to communicate with her using text or direct message on Twitter or even Snapchat. Okay, so the reason is, when we met with this person, we tried to first fix the relationship that had gone south, because I knew the other lawyer. That didn't happen. And the reason she and I got along so well is that we exchanged information using text. We exchanged information on Snapchat, private snaps, which is so powerful, as you well know, with video and texting. And I can actually sit here and take a video or a picture of what's on my desk right here and show the client what I'm doing. So communicate with the client the way they want you to communicate with them. And that's the first step to a very solid recipe for long-term success when it comes to attorney-client or business-client relationships. And if that answer has to do with you using a smartphone in a way that you haven't used it before, learn how to use that application. You know, take the time, or have somebody in your office take the time to learn how to use your smartphone, because that's the key to long-term success, in my opinion.
I completely agree. Particularly, you're talking about there are many more versatile ways to talk to people than an email or even a phone call. My dad's always getting on my case because I only work a text. I mean, he was in the voicemail.
Right.
I don't even listen to it. I just let me just text you what he want. But
Exactly.
even things like WhatsApp,
Mhm.
Facebook Messenger, Snapchat, we already pointed out, Twitter direct messages. I know that is a really awesome way to get in touch with people, and if they get an instant notification, it's not cluttering their inbox. And for you to say, to focus on that people need to ask their client or customer, how do you want me to coordinate with you? You've already done half the work there, and they're like, oh, great, you can actually get in touch with me in a way that I will respond to.
Yeah, they understand that you care about their needs. It shows that you're willing to listen. It shows that they're the priority and not you, and that's the way it should be. And I'll tell you what, I was talking this is last year, David Merriman Scott and I were chatting about something, and he's a very well-known speaker and consultant, and I love his books. He's just a great guy. But we were talking about how all of this technology makes business fun again. I mean, it really does. It's such a cool way to do things differently and to put a smile on someone's face that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do with a phone call or a boring letter written on a lawyer's letterhead, right? And so there's so many intangibles into what we're doing today. And by embracing the new technology, as long as it has a mobile component to it, I mean, it's fun to do too. And I think people appreciate that.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Well, Mitch, we're coming up on the top of the hour. I have one question for you that has nothing to do with what we've talked about.
Uh-oh. Sounds like trouble.
It'll be fun. So whenever I do a who's on social media, I do like to ask some fun questions. We only have time for one. And again, anyone who has questions, please feel free to ask in the sidebar. We can make sure we get it to Mitch. He's also at streaming.lawyer, and you can get a hold of him there. But Mr. Streaming.lawyer, I'd like to find out, if you had a biopic, a movie done about your life, who would you select to play your role and why?
If I got to pick who would play me in a movie about my life.
Yes. Sky's the limit. It can be anyone as long as you think they should do it.
Well, I'll tell you what, it would have to be somebody. I just turned 59. All right. So it'd have to be somebody, at least my age or older. And, but I don't like to take myself too seriously. There's too many lawyers that already do that. So that's a really interesting question. I'll tell you who I think's got a very unique and likable sense of humor. And he also happens to be a pretty good actor. I think he's a little younger than I am, and that's George Clooney. Okay, I like the way George Clooney jokes around with all of his pals, Matt Damon, Brad Pitt. I like the guy back and forth banter. He would make me look good, so that's not a bad thing.
That's right.
And they probably also having him up on the big screen would sell tickets. And once again, I'm thinking long term, or Rachel, if it's going to happen, why don't we profit from this whole thing when it's said and done? So I would say someone like that, or I can't think offhand, but maybe I'll tell you who else I really like is Will Smith.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a huge Will Smith fan, and if he could put some gray in his hair and look a little bit older than he is, I would be honored if Will Smith would play my life. That would be great.
That would be amazing. You chose two very good guys. I think those are awesome. And maybe they could do two versions of the movie, it'd be like in Will Smith and George Clooney.
Well,
and you're got such an epic life.
But you're missing the point. Nobody would go and see that movie. So that's a whole nother huzzah for another time. But
I bet the sidebar people would see it.
I'm just answering your question. So those are the two guys, Ted Danson. Yeah, Ted reminds me too much of my life back in college. I'm going to pass on Ted.
Well, look at the source. It's Cammy. And Tom Cruise.
It's funny.
Tom Hanks.
Oh, I love Tom Hanks. Tom Cruise is cool. I love Tom Hanks. It's interesting. Just real quick, signing off. Let me just say, I brought up college, and people ask me, I've had a lot of success in court as a trial lawyer, and that has to do with really, I want everybody to think about this for a second. You've got a case that you've had for 2 or 3 years. You walk into a courtroom, there are 12 people you've never met before that don't want to be there. They don't like lawyers. They'd rather be doing something else with their time. And your client's fate comes down to what these 12 people are going to do or say or decide. And it's nerve-wracking, but it's also really, really exciting. I love doing this. And people ask me, well, what's the best training you've ever had for being able to develop instant rapport? Because that's what it really is developing rapport with a group of people who don't want to be there, who don't like you, and would rather be doing something else. I go back to my college days of being a bartender and a waiter and actually working the front door. You instantly had to deal with people you've never met before, develop a rapport because you're working for tips, right? And it was an interesting way of growing up, which had nothing to do with practicing law. And my takeaway today, Rachel, is in addition to everything else that we've talked about, it's so important for, I think, me to see what all of you, including you, what you guys are doing on the social media platforms, learning from the social media pros and bringing it back into my law firm and using these bells, whistles, and techniques to do what I'm doing to try to help my clients as a lawyer. I'll tell you a little secret. I've changed how I give my opening statements and my closing arguments based upon the time and attention issues we're seeing on the digital platforms. I'm now speaking in 140 character sentences. When I've got young jurors, I understand I've only got a small amount of time to capture their attention, to build rapport, to sell myself, and to sell my client's case. And so we're shortening everything down. We're talking in short sound bites. I'm thinking social media when I'm speaking. Oftentimes I'll refer to, if I can incorporate Snapchat or Instagram into my conversation, I want them to know that I'm all in on those platforms. And it's just an interesting way of taking whatever's outside of your occupation or your profession, bring it into what you're doing, look around, and if everybody else in town is doing something different than how you're going about doing something, that tells me you're doing it the right way. You don't want to be like everybody else. And I know I'm not the first person to say that, but it's so true. And as soon as people start realizing it's okay to be different and unique, that's when their song will start to be heard above all the noise. That's why I like being on shows like this that have nothing to do with practicing law, but it has everything to do with building relationships, meeting new people, and really just having fun. So Rachel, I really appreciate you having me on your show today.
Thank you so much for being on. And I've shared your Twitter handle in the sidebar. Mitch, you've been a fabulous guest. Would be really hard to follow that one. So you guys, please feel free to replay this, share it with your other business owners and anyone who wants to learn from probably the best lawyer on social media. So thank you for being on with us today.
It's my pleasure.
And I bid you all a very really social day, and join us next Tuesday for what's happening on social media here with Laugh and Learn by Really Social. Have a great day, guys.
Bye, everybody. Take care.